Hello, hello everybody, and welcome to the first ever devlog that I'm producing for Midnight Dawn of Darkness, my tabletop RPG strategy game that I've been working on for a relatively long time, actually. In fact, I've been working on it for 5 years now, and you're only basically just now getting to hear about it. Um, it's kind of weird to be doing one of these because I haven't really scripted anything for this because there hasn't been anything in particular that I'd like to tell you about that I've made, because here's the thing, I've never done a devlog before for this game. So I feel like this devlog should first be a just a sort of going into everything that I've made involving MDOT, and if it becomes rambly, then so be it. I mean, it's part of me, it's part of this channel, it's part of this game a little bit, but yeah, you know. So, without further ado, I mean, yeah, on screen now, this is what most people are going to see whenever you buy and get the official MDOT manual. It's been a thing that I've mentioned for a long time. Eventually, people in my Discord server, once you're in the Discord server, who have done some stuff with my YouTube channel in the future or have paid me directly, you know, where there's plans for you to be able to buy and purchase access to MDOT via, you know, being a part of the channel, and when you're in there, you're gonna see this, basically what's on your screen now, which is a relatively dense folder of just things, basically, and we're gonna go through that dense folder of things now while we're here, just, you know, introduce everything. In the past, we've discussed the tutorial for MDOT. I'm not at all worried about discussing that, and if you want that, I mean, there's videos I've posted in the past involving the tutorial, the character sheets, and whatnot, but that is, I guess, one of the first few things I'd like to talk about involving this game. One of the first few things that I made whenever I was making MDOT was its tutorial and its character sheets, and, you know, explaining how the character sheet worked. And in all honesty, I feel like that taught me a lot about the game and a lot about what I was making that I've kind of just built off of for 5 years now, basically, where everything that I make in this game interacts with the engine, which is what your character sheet is. It is the engine of your character, basically. And I've just been working, producing, and trying to find new, interesting ways to interact with that character sheet and just play off of it and just see how everything can work. And some of that's covered in monsters, basically. Some of that is covered by, like, the different races and the classes that we're going to talk about in a bit, but this is truly where the game, I believe, personally started for me, was figuring out that character sheet, the main 8 stats of health, attack, resistance, defense, dodge, speed, luck, and skill, and just how they interact with each other, and all that that involves, basically. And from there, I went a lot of places with it. The first campaign I made of this was a very different game, in all honesty. The first campaign, which is the Entourage Rebellion campaign that I mentioned in the Dragon video, the Entourage Rebellion played more akin to Fire Emblem instead of akin to Dungeons and Dragons, which this game does pull a lot of inspiration from Fire Emblem, but, like, what I mean by that is in between, or you'd have missions. In between missions, you would go to a base, and in that base is how you would interact with and decide to go out into, the world and discuss with people and all that. And it was actually in those more world building discussion segments where like I started to tilt this more and more towards D&D interactions system, and the more base style of discussion has been entirely moved over to its own segment that does still exist, but that's what most people now know of as like crafting sessions, or like the rest and relaxation part of the game. And just that shift from Fire Emblem focus to having Fire Emblem strategy in Dungeons and Dragons, like, hugely defined a lot of what I thought about MDOD, and it also changed my enjoyment of the game massively. Yeah, after that, like, as I was going through the Entourage Rebellion campaign that I did with my friends right at the beginning of MDOD, we went and discussed a lot about monsters, and I mean, I'll even pull it up for you guys. Like, you can see some of the weird things I did where I was trying some things, and like slimes were the first monster I ever made, and just understanding that slimes have unintentionally become a basis for my way of designing monsters and how they work. It's just been something that just works almost, and it's interesting just to see how far I've gone with some of the other monsters that I don't want to show on screen, just because, one, the manual is not anywhere near its completion, and two, if I show too much in this, then there's some people who could cheese the entire thing, figure it out, and be like, okay, I have my own version of MDOD, so yeah, I kind of am like hesitant to show some things with it. I just note that, yeah, slimes were a thing that honestly also have shaped a lot of things, because I still use slimes as like some of the first enemies in almost every campaign. I mean, Depths of the Blighted Heart, what's the first enemy set in that game? Ghosts and slimes. Every campaign, I swear, has its slime somewhere, where a slime just is like, hello, I'm here, slap, doop-de-doo, and that's it. And yeah, I mean, building off of that, I entirely forgot to mention, like, there was a time back in the day when you were playing MDOD, where the first thing, so for those of you who don't know, when you create your character now in MDOD, you get 3 choices of the base class lists that are right here. At the beginning of the game, at the beginning of me making the game, not only were you expected to have more than one character you were playing at a time, which didn't feel very D&D-esque, as I have noted, you were also expected to only get 1 chance per character at these base class trees. I severely changed it because I felt not only was it a bit unfair in giving you a little bit more choice in the matter, it also just felt it felt not like a tabletop game. It felt like I was trying to make a video game. And while yes, I do eventually intend to make MDOD's tabletop game into a video game, it felt backwards to me doing that way. And shortly after the Entourage Rebellion campaign, actually no, it wasn't even shortly after the Entourage Rebellion campaign, it was after the Dark Moon War campaign, so literally 1 to 2 campaigns prior, or 1.5 campaigns prior is what I'll say, I made the decision to shift you from roughly a party of 12 characters to a party of 4, with just a lot more options and variability in the classes. And honestly, I think that's one of the best decisions I've made involving MDOD. MDOD feels much more focused, much more character-centric. Each character feels right in their own sense of how you play them. and it feels more attached to each character, whereas prior to that, with permadeath being almost expected, you kind of didn't feel as attached to your characters, and you didn't feel like if one of them died, it was a, oh crap, we've lost a character and we've lost their options, but it wasn't as impactful. I mean, the impact of 1/12 of your party versus the impact of 1/4 of your party dying was something that was absolutely life changing. And I remember my friends when we were playing this thinking, dude, swapping to a third of the characters that you're supposed to have, we're gonna die. We're gonna die so often. And then I introduced them the armor system, which changed everything. But that's moving like 20 steps ahead. In fact, you know, while I'm thinking about it, like, looking at this, I remember when each of the class trees were only 3 chunks. I remember when Dark Magic wasn't even a class tree. Dark Magic used to be lumped in with the Stealth class tree, and it used to play so differently, in all honesty, having that change, just because Dark Magic was located elsewhere, basically. And that just, like, that difference, there's still a lot of variability in it, but, like, now that I've made all of the class trees their own class tree, and we've worked on it, it just feels more ironed out that if you're choosing this class tree, it's because you want some of the things that it affects. Whereas some of the early game, it felt like with, like, say, for instance, blades, you were choosing between, would I like to be foot blade, horse blade, or armor blade? And those were your options. Or would I like to be foot lancer, horse lancer, or polar, or, shield lancer, basically. Like, it felt so one tone on some of them and not as direct. And also there were some that were drastically different because you were playing 2 separate weapon styles, whereas now each of the base class trees feels their own way. They feel closely knit, but not too closely knit. And there's something else that I'm going to talk about later that's going to drastically affect your viewing of that. But, just in general, these base class trees have shifted so much that it feels right with what I've discussed about them to just understand, there's been a lot of development here, especially in terms of how you even start the game. And then, from there, I mean, you've got all the weapons and statuses in the game. I mean, developing this one has been a slow but residual slog that has kept adding and adding to the game non-stop. In fact, it's a joke that everybody says this game has more weapons than any other tabletop RPG. It's because we have over 100 pages of weapons in this game that I have made, that I have done properly, just to make sure that each weapon feels like a proper addition to the game and fits its own requirement. And yet here we are with 100+ pages of them that I can't showcase because it would basically sell like half the game, without actually selling you the game, basically. And therefore I'm like, I can't showcase it to you. But they basically change everything that is MDOD in a way, because it just built so much of MDOD. And, working on them, giving them the durability, giving them, like, a unique understanding of all the balancing of the stats that are involved, like how accuracy works in this game, how the damage bonus is, in all honesty, one of the weirdest things that both is and isn't important. It's weird, and how range is secretly like a overpowered stat that guns love, because yes, the guns in the game that do exist are where range just kind of goes out the window, and everybody who plays them are like, oh my gosh, this is some range for my damage. And yeah, it's been a lot of figuring out with those, basically what I'm doing. And then moving into some of the more modern design decisions, like there's been board conditions that have slowly entered the game where the game is, like you're not just fighting your enemy, you're handling your terrain and how that terrain affects things. And there's a whole bunch of different things. Like I literally have a terrain type known as Scorched Earth, where being on the ground of that terrain type burns you and lights you on fire if you're burnt. And if you are not smart, it will deal massive damage to you, and you need to get out of burnt earth as soon as possible, or else it is near to certain death because of things lighting you on fire and trying to burn you. And then you follow that up with some of the other terrain types I've made. Like, there's just a lot that has gone into effect. There's a lot of decisions as well that I've made with the terrain that I feel like for a tabletop game is hard to interact with. Say, for instance, fog and darkness effects. I really wish that I had made them a bit more available, and it's something that I'm struggling to understand how to make them more available for a tabletop game because of the way that the game works. Like, fog, what it does is it closes off your vision. But for a lot of people, that means that, like, the range of it needs to be specific, loop back what I am saying here. The distance that you are viewing, because each room, normally the way you play MDOT is you build a room that is what your battle map is at the time, and having the fog fill that entire room just feels a bit extreme, or having the fog be removed from that entire room when a character walks in feels a bit extreme. So there's like a range of which you can view with the fog. The problem with that becomes updating that fog and that darkness effect, because it severely slows down game time. In tabletop MDOT, or in digital MDOT, not tabletop, in digital MDOT, like, fog is going to be something that I feel a lot of people are not going to be afraid to use, but it's going to be something that, like, when you do use it well, it works good. And I like how fog works, it's just slow for the tabletop players, basically, which is one of my major problems. And then alongside that, like, battle skills, they've recently gotten to some huge amount of pages. Battle skills themselves have gotten to over 59 pages of battle skills, which is insanity in terms of what I've been able to create. And of course, with some of these devlogs that I'm doing, I'm intending on putting in a lot more of them. In fact, I've got an idea for in a couple of weeks what I want to have worked on, completed, and done in terms of new battle skills, because I feel like they are the type of battle skills that are going to change a lot about how you play these, like, in terms of ideas for strategy games in general. And MDOT has a lot of those instances where I feel like it goes and changes what a strategy game is in general. Like, for crying out loud, we have a Gamblomancer class, which the entire aspect of the class is, what if we strategized RNG? And that's just boom to me. And there's a lot of interesting ideas that I want to get to eventually involving that. And, this then moves onwards to, because of Die Hard's existence as a skill, and some broken things that happened in the Dark Moon War campaign that in turn made me think about, like, how survivable a character should be whenever I was moving to 4 character groups instead of 12. I ended up making Death's Gambit, which Death's Gambit is by far and away one of the better systems of death in a game that I can think of for tabletop. So in D&D, the way that going down, dying, and being knocked unconscious works is you reach 0 HP, you get knocked unconscious. You then spend the next 3 turns at maximum, I should say, either dreading for your life because you are going to die because things are trying to finish you off and making you take a lot of death saves and a lot of fails because of that, or you end up sitting there for the 3 turns waiting for you to successfully get past, all of that, or one of your friends comes up and helps you up and you're not worried about dying anymore, or you get healed for a minimum 1 HP and suddenly, boom, you're back on your feet again and you don't need to worry about it. MDOD entirely throws that idea out the window because Death's Gambit is the way we do it. So, Death's Gambit is a very gritty and brutal system that if you aren't careful with, can severely ruin a character and makes it so that you can go from a character who is surviving a battle fine, can get knocked down once or twice, and still keep kicking to, oh my gosh, where's all my health? Why am I taking so much damage? And oh my gosh, I don't have any stats anymore until, the Death's Gambit effects are healed. And that's honestly one of the greatest things about the system, in my opinion. It's a system that makes it so every time you go down, you get a chance to keep going. But that chance gets much more higher and higher because of the fact that you are much more likely to keep going down after that. Every single Death's Gambit requires you to sacrifice something important, be it your weapon or your stats, and after those sacrifices are made, if you succeeded the Death's Gambit, you get to keep going until you're forced to make more sacrifices because you've now died again, and it just compounds. A smart player will never need to worry about Death's Gambit. They will never need to. A player who isn't thinking rationally is going to end up having to deal with it a lot, especially because, if there's any of my friends playing the game versus me, not versus me, playing the game with me, I also like to make everything very hard, and the Death's Gambit system is just very hard in general, and ouchie, and pain, and oof. And they all feel it because I make sure that every boss fight at least does 1 to 2 knockdowns on a majority of the players. And yeah, that in and of itself is something that makes them all afraid of my bosses. And that system just, I feel like it got said to me the other day that it is the most gritty and realistic knockdown system that a player has felt in a tabletop RPG game that didn't feel boring or just overly threatening. It is definitely threatening, but it isn't overly threatening. And the other thing that's newer to the game in terms of idea is the rest and relaxation ideas that I've made, which those make crafting sessions with it, which interacts with background skills. And I mean, background skills are used everywhere, or not background skills, non-battle skills, like soft skills, basically, such as the athletics, the aquatics, the alchemy, as I name all the A skills, because those are the ones that are coming to my head. The mining is in there, geology is in there. You've got like firekeeping for, going towards smithing and whatnot. Like all of those skills that make up a character's ability to do things outside of the battle and do things within, their life, their way of acting. Speechcraft is another one that's important because speechcraft is the most called for skill in talking events with other characters, basically, NPCs and whatnot. And all of that has added up because I wanted to shift from the base system to something that wasn't the base system to something that you could interact with as you're walking around in the world. And then, you know, that added in with rest and relaxation and made crafting hours and crafting sessions in general. Like this chunk right here, and furthermore some of the additions that were added on to the end of the character sheet that I've already mentioned, changed the game. And then you also add in the fact that armor got added around the same time, and holy cow, so many things got changed around that time when I was making this part of the game that everything just went boom. And that's before we even talk about the fact that, like, there's crafting in the game. Yeah. Crafting, well, I mean, we've mentioned it with, you know, crafting hours and whatnot, but no, you can craft, like, your own weapons in the game that become better than most of the weapons you'll find. You can find, you know, materials to make your weapons, armor, potions, anything you want. Like, there's literally a full insane alchemy system, which goes from you being able to take a pile of dirt to make the weapons of God and use those weapons of God to make the pile of dirt you started from again. Like, blah. It's insane what can be done in this game in terms of crafting. And that's before even talking, you know, like, the fact of what's to come. And what's to come for MDOD is a whole bunch of stuff. There's a lot of races in the game, and there's a lot of playable races, I should say, with intent to add a lot more to them. I believe in the game right now there's 160 playable races if you include all the sub races. I'm intending to add a minimum of 10 more basic races, and making sure that each of the races in the game has a grand total of at least 6 sub races to play from. So that's like 25 times about 6 total playable races for roughly, as I do mental math and fail horribly, 150 playable, well, that tells me I'm already wrong. Hang on. Give me a minute. Yeah, looking over the races document, I was entirely incorrect with saying there was only, you know, like 15 races in the game as of current. No. There's 21 in the game already, so 31, sorry. So at least 186 total playable races is intended. But a lot of the races already go over 6, so I'm wanting to add like a few more. So there will be a lot of playable variations of a character, and a lot of my major focus with this game, especially when it's come to the races and the classes, as I've mentioned, is making sure that no matter how you play this game, you will never play the same character twice. And that's the thing that I've had that's like a problem with a lot of other tabletop RPGs is I feel like in D&D you always end up playing a certain combo of race, class, you know, play style, where, for instance, like Tiefling Warlock, very common play style. Everybody plays it. Or, you know, just typical human fighter. Like, those things are things that I don't like seeing in the game, because I want to see players playing with variability and trying a lot of different new things. And around the races, around the classes is where a lot of that comes in, because you're always going to be playing something new and unique whenever you make a new character in this game. It's just one of the major focuses of it. And I feel like that's the thing where I need to say, like, this is what MDOD has come to so far, where everything that I am doing in this game is to make sure that no matter what comes from it, it feels like a different game than anything else on the market for tabletop RPGs. It's a very non-expensive tabletop RPG to get into, and furthermore, it's something that once you start playing, once you understand it, you will never ever play it the same way twice. where every character will play uniquely, differently, and specially to every other player of the game. Where two versions of a sword master can play entirely as two separately different characters, despite the fact that they are the same class, playing the same, quote unquote basic style, but because of their stats, their racial decisions of what they chose to be at the start of the game, and everything else like that, they play entirely differently. And with that, I'd like to say, yeah, this has been Devlog 1 of Midnight Dawn of Darkness. I look forward to eventually sharing this game more with you, and I look forward to maybe as we furthermore, gain some popularity on this channel and, work towards the future of MDOT with all of its lore and stuff that I'm working on. And in fact, some of the major updates we're working on in the manual right now are all related to the lore, hence all the lore videos we're making. We will eventually make something where you all will happily enjoy this game and happily do your best to, play it how you want to play it and see how unique and how special MDOT is to everyone, who's played it. I guess. I don't know how to say it. It's just going to be, how special can it be for you, per se. And I've put a lot of work into making sure that no matter how you play it, you will feel special in your own way playing MDOT. So yeah, thank you all so much for watching. If you'd like to know more, have any questions, comment them down below, or join the Discord. The Discord is where you can contact me directly and talk to me. I always try to respond to every comment on YouTube, but even then, sometimes I'm dumb, I miss a few things, so talk to me on Discord, discuss with me there, and eventually the Discord is where you're going to have to be to gain access to Tabletop MDOT anyways, so you might as well join soon in the future, if you're interested in seeing and following the development of Midnight Dawn and Dawn of Darkness. If I could speak my own game name. Good gosh. I hope you didn't mind that this was a more unscripted video. I feel like the devlogs just make sense to be more unscripted in terms of things. The next time we discuss, we're going to discuss a lot of things, probably involving a little bit of some grammar updates that have been done to the manual, and furthermore follow it up with some unique ideas involving some battle skills that I've wanted to develop for a little bit now, ever since I've heard of the idea thrown around by a few of my peers in the strategy RPG development field. And with that, I have to say thank you all so much for watching. I will see you all in the next one. Have a good one. Bye-bye!